Welcome to Human Monsters. The following is adapted from the memoir Inside the Crips by Colton Simpson. Ice-T wrote a foreword for Inside the Crips. When he was an active Crip, he was an associate of Simpson's. Simpson even attended one of his early concerts. This is an excerpt. Art comes from pain and suffering. Poverty creates pain, so there's plenty of suffering in the ghetto. Inside the Crips is born from that suffering, the suffering of Colton Simpson, the suffering of the ghetto. Colton insightfully breaks down what ghetto life is like and what we've been through. Colton was devoted to the hood, and he became a rider, jewel thief, Crip stabilizer, OG, original gangster or general, of the Crips gang. For a lot of years, both in the hood and in California prisons, he was the man. Here, he reveals the life of many of us, not only in the South Central Los Angeles ghetto, but in all the ghettos and all the prisons across America. I met Colton, C, we called him, when he was 10 at Smiley's house. C was Smiley's boy, a skinny 10-year-old, not even old enough to have a temper, just an edge. He was small in stature, but not in heart, and was resolute on becoming somebody in the world. He wasn't afraid of anything. He was hot, quick, and aggressive. Ice-T gave a speech about his experiences as a gang member in 1988. This is that speech.
I was listening to the doctors and the people that just got finished talking about the gangs, and I agree with them on a lot of the stuff. You know, it's a very serious problem. The kids are more, but my problem with it is I believe the kids are more blind than they are wrong. They just don't see. I was in gangs. I was in for 4 years. Then I left out of the gangs and I got into what you would call street hustling. I was a player, you know what I'm saying? I'm out there making. My crew, which ranged from guys 15 to 22, we made $500,000 a week. I left that, and I tell people, I say, I'm rapping now, but I made more money in 1 weekend than I've made in my entire rap career. And it's important that kids know that, you know, I left the flamboyancy and the money for something that's different. It's like I traded infamy for fame. It's like another thing. And I believe in positive role models. A lot of people look at me and they'll say, "Oh, Ice-T, you got a gun around your neck. You look like a pimp," you know. But the thing of it is a positive role model to a lot of kids comes off as square nowadays. We're living in '88, and the man in the suit just doesn't get the point across. Sometimes you have to use with a negative role model with a positive message. You can take the basketball player who gets out of college and take him back and teach school, but you can also take Mr. Carr's penitentiary prison inmates, take them to the elementary schools, because the kids will listen to somebody, but the main thing is they gotta know you've been there. They don't listen to nobody if they don't know you've been there. And like in my records, I talk a lot of violence, I talk about sex, I talk about drugs, but I do it for realism. People say, "Well, Ice-T, well, why would you have all this violence in your records?" I mean, I've walked across a skating rink parking lot, right? And I heard one click. I heard a gun go, bang. Me and my homeboy looked around. I heard a second bang. Bang! His head just blew up, right? Brains on me, you know? I live that. I seen girls get beat down in the goddamn street, like I said in my records. And parents say, "Man, that's just violence." But I'm grabbing these kids with reality, and what they say is, Ice knows what time it is. Let me listen to him. Then I tag them with the real fact that you're going to be in trouble, you're going to be hurt. I've been shot, and I've been through all this. And rap, fortunately, is getting these kids. Right now, rap music is the music to the kids. All the gang members listen to it. Every kid out there listens to rap. When I was growing up, I listened to Parliament. You know what I'm saying? Rap got them now. So what they do is that we get all these kids, 20,000 of them in a big arena, and then they say violence breaks out. The main thing is we got them in that arena. We got all these kids. You name something else, you can get 20,000 gang members and street hard rocks in a room. period. You can't do it. Nobody can do it. They ain't coming to see no basketball games, no athletes, nothing. They're listening to rappers right now. So then the parents will say, why don't you give a positive message? But you got to understand, it's got to be done with code. It's got to be tricky. It's got to be slick. Because as soon as I say, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, I'm you. See, I'm the parent. See, so it's got to be like, well, I'm living, I'm having it. Oh, whoop, what happened? Whoop, I got a bullet in my head. And they're like, oh, wow. You know, and it's a very tricky technique. The street gang situation in Los Angeles is real crazy. I made the record Colors. A lot of people, why are you making that? That's promoting gangs. That's pushing them. You know, it sounds like a pro-gang record if you really listen to it. But I wrote it from the perspective of a gang member. I wrote it from the way they think. And you got to understand, anybody that'll go out and kill like that, they got to believe deep down in their mind what they're doing is right. It's a bent mentality, but they believe there's some justice behind it. They're killing their friend. And there's admirable quality in gang membership. When you got 2 brothers or 5 brothers that will kill because somebody killed their friend, that's something. It's not good, but it's something. You see what I'm saying? I mean, when I was in a gang, somebody would call up and say, Ice, Nate just got took out. I'd go on automatic pilot. Couldn't talk. Where they at? You know what I'm saying? I lost that. I mean, now I think about different things. I think about life. I think about my girl. I think about living, you know. But at the time I was like that, jail wasn't no different than home, you know. When you hear kids say, I don't care if I go to penitentiary, man, it ain't nothing. What's he saying about home? It's just like there's no big difference. If home was good, believe me, he wouldn't want to go to the pen. If he'd been once, he can add it up. You know what I'm saying? And I deal, Ice-T's, these other guys have different techniques. My technique is scared straight, blatant reality. You can sell dope. You might get shot in the face. Your mother might get killed. Your parents, anybody, your friends could get killed. You might get rich, but the odds are against it. If you don't tell them that they might get rich, they say, you're lying, because my man down the street got a Benz. What you talking about? How you going to tell them? But you got to tell them the full picture, because kids have scanners in their heads, and they listen. And as soon as you tell them one thing that they think's a lie, they shut off. You a sucker, get out of here. They don't want to hear you. And people will not tell these kids the truth. The truth is, you got big buildings in Washington, D.C. 10% of them people in them buildings are criminals, crooks, getting away with everything. Well, he says 90%. Now, this is an older man than I am, so I have to respect his opinion. 90% of the people in there are criminals. That's from experience. So crime, and this, you know, what we have here is a capitalistic society, which you say money governs. If you got money, you running it. So you train the kids to believe who got the money, the guy with the gold makes the rules. We've shown them, and in order for this society to work, you have to have 3 different classes. You got to have poor, middle class, and rich, right? So what you do is you say, we got to have this. But in order for a capitalistic society to work, you got to have crime, which keeps the cops employed. A war makes money for the economy. If we go to war, we'll flourish. If we just have good crime, we flourish. Money, they sell fear to us. You got to put an alarm on your car. You got to get these burglar bars. And it's a whole big game. And the bottom line is, gangs were allowed to grow in the cities. They allowed it. When I grew up, I'm not trying to get too long, but when I was growing up, it was known in my neighborhood. I could kill another brother. I could steal anything I want. Just don't kill nobody white. And don't kill no cop, and you'll live. No problem. Because they're going to say it's a gang murder. Where am I going to go? Okay? So you allow crime to just grow in the ghettos, right? It just grows and grows. It's legal. We can do it. 20 years, all right? And it gets real thick. Then what happens? They made a mistake. Cocaine got in the black neighborhood. They forgot. Now there's money there. Now these kids, what they could have stopped 10 years ago in L.A. when they were just killing for colors. Now they're killing for money. So now you say, stop them overnight. A white lady got killed in Westwood. They told me there was 70,000 gang members joined up that night. All of a sudden they said there's 70,000 gang members in L.A. It took a long time for this to happen. But all of a sudden it spread out. And if you let this room in your house get dirty enough, it spreads to the other neighborhoods. So now I tell America what's going to happen is the dirt is coming out of the black communities. They're making $500,000 a week. They're moving right into the house next door to you in your suburban area with the money they made last night. Uzis in their vests, and they're just capitalists. That's all they are. That's all they are. People aren't brought up bad. I mean, I was on Donahue, and they laid it out like this. A lot of brothers, you should just line them up and kill them. Just line them up and shoot them. That's ignorant. They're just doing what we taught them, and it's wrong. Believe me, I don't agree with it, but I don't have that line them up and kill them. I don't have that the drug dealer is the baddest person on the streets. Cocaine cannot be manufactured in the United States. All right? You want to go find out where the cocaine's coming from, you have to go look in some of these White Houses out here. You know what I'm saying? Because it's really coming, and that's basically it. So don't blame it on my brothers. I'm trying to stop them. I'm trying to tell them that I don't want them to go to jail. I want them to live, but it's a real problem. Gangs is a problem, but it's a lot of other problems that are going out there that keep gangs alive. You see what I'm saying? Keep gangs alive. Because when they had a gang problem in L.A., they said it's on a rise, and what happened was the cops got $4 million to sweep for 2 nights. In the crime, cops get laid off. Right? My man, I just read an article, my man here, I'm going to end it like this. A cop will catch a kid with some crack. Check the crack, it's under an ounce, a gram or whatever. He'll let the kid go. All right? Either you're going to enforce the law or not. He'll let him go, he'll wait and bust you for the key. But you know why he busts you for the key? Because the key gets him the promotion. See, the gram is paperwork. And they don't care. They're either going to deal with the crime or they're not. Or else all laws are illegal. You can't take my man to jail for an ounce and then smoke a joint in the police car on the way back to the station. Kids know what's going on. You know, and I tell them what's going on, and I think y'all know what's going on. Why everybody acting like they don't? I'm out of here.
Colton Simpson grew up in the Compton district of Los Angeles. He lived in poverty, raised by his mother with his siblings. After his parents' acrimonious divorce, a man named Jimmy decided that one means of escorting him into manhood was to teach him how to hunt. A hunter, not a trapper. No bows, no arrows. He wasn't about to chase the animals around with a stick or a rock in his hand either. Modern hunters feed their target a diet of bullets before dining on their carcasses. Colton began by shooting cans. He was a natural, rarely missing the mark. From that point onwards, Colton was obsessed with guns. He saved money he received at Christmas and his birthday to buy a pop revolver, essentially a toy, in the same league as a BB gun, but safer. The appeal of the pop gun was the pop it made when it was fired. He and his brother Damone practiced shooting each other around the house. The popping produced enough smoke and contributed to the general haze of smoke from tobacco and marijuana in the house. It was a chaotic house with few rules. Eventually, the pop gun failed to satisfy the marksman in Colton. He eventually saved up enough money to buy a BB gun for himself and Damone. They went around the neighborhood, shooting at every target that wouldn't shoot back. They spent a lot of time alone together, which was preferable to spending time with their mother, who was abusive. She fought with Pete, her common-law husband, which was another source of stress. Those guns ennobled the boys, made them feel like they had some semblance of power in an atmosphere in which they were scapegoated for everything that went wrong in their mother's life. Pete was physically abusive toward Colton's mother. He was racist, using racial epithets in reference to black people, even though Colton, his mother, and his siblings were black. Pete beat Colton with a belt. Colton's mother did not intervene because she always resented Colton for resembling his father. That accident of genetics was unforgivable as far as she was concerned. She watched Pete beat Colton until he wore himself out. Pete beat him until Colton bled. He whipped patches of skin from Colton's body. Colton called his father in hopes that he would come and get him. He never did. Violence was baked into Colton's life at an early age, outside of and behind closed doors. Pete eventually moved out of the house. Colton and Damone anticipated that their life would improve in his absence. He was wrong. His mother felt burdened by his and Damone's presence in the house. She would slap him and Damone and say things like, "It's you fucking kids why I can't keep no man. It's you fucking kids." It was ironic that she would take this stance after fighting so hard in court for custody. She could not bring herself to forgive her kids for her inability to keep a man on the premises, and she made a habit of reminding them of her stance. One night his mother tied a blue rag around Colton's head. It was tied so tightly and was so thick he couldn't see a thing. She put him in her car and drove him away from the house, continuing with her litany about how he was to blame for her lack of adult male companionship. Throughout the commute, the rag became imbued with mucus and tears. The broken record continued. "It's you goddamn kids. It's you goddamn kids. You goddamn kids." Suddenly the car pulled to a stop. She said, "Get out of my car. Get out." Colton got out of the car. He was still crying. He assumed it was a scare tactic. He and his brother were not conscientious about the upkeep of the house. It had been a bone of contention with his mother. He figured she was simply going to extremes to scare him into cleaning the house. Still blind behind the rag, he reached out to touch the door handle. He intended to get back in the car to tell her that the plan worked. He would comply and do his part to keep the house clean and tidy. The opportunity was not availed to him. Before he could say the words, his mother silenced him with a squeal of her tires. As the dust settled, Colton removed the rag from his head. It was very dark. He didn't know where he was. He saw a house with its porch light on. It began to rain. Alone in the world now, Colton was determined to get himself through. He kept telling himself, "You can make it. You can make it." There were other thoughts he wrestled with as part of his internal monologue. Thoughts like, "What did I do to deserve this?" Don't think that. Can't feel sorry for yourself, or you're lost. Suddenly Damone appeared beside him. He didn't know he had even been in the car. Colton wrapped his arms around himself and tried to remain self-assured. A woman came out of the house and took in the sight of the two lanky boys, clad in pajamas and blue rags. Damone explained what happened. She was shocked by what their mother had done, though not for the reason they were likely expecting. She said, "Oh my God, she put blue beanies over your face and dropped you off in a blood neighborhood." The woman took them in and called their maternal grandmother Louise. They went to live with Louise in South Central Los Angeles. Though they would visit their mother or father some weekends, for the most part they stayed at Louise's house. That house was situated on 2nd Avenue. That is significant to this story because of the fact that it is located at ground zero of the Harlem Crips Rollin' 30s set. It is the second biggest gang territory in South Central Los Angeles. Louise, unlike their mother, was loving and kind toward the boys. One day she came home to find Colton playing dice with some older boy. He had been drinking beer and smoking marijuana. Instead of beating him like his mother or Pete would have, she made him pray 4 times and made him promise not to play dice with older boys. Louise was not able to keep Colton off the streets. He was never able to develop the kind of feelings a son would customarily feel for a maternal figure. This made it easy for him to disappoint her. He turned 9 in autumn of that year. While playing football with a friend from around the way, he ended up in a dispute with his friend Dimitri. Colton had been taught by his father to react to bullying and other forms of disrespect with physical violence. He punched Dimitri to show him what time it was. That was not the end of the dispute. Dimitri went home and brought back his big brother. His big brother, known as Smiley, had a blue flag hanging from his shirt pocket, pants hanging low on his hips, blue shoelaces, walking with a slow-paced strut, with one shoulder leaning to the side. He was a textbook Crip. He had a rep, and those who were in the know knew better than to fuck with him. He approached Colton and said, "How old are you, cuz?" Colton said, 9. "Did you jump my brother?" Colton was honest and admitted to striking Dimitri. Smiley turned to Dimitri. "He's more than 4 years younger than me, and 2 years younger than you, and you want me to beat him up?" Mercifully, Colton was off the hook. Smiley said to Dimitri, "You disrespect this cuz, and then he whooped your ass. That's what you get. If you want to fight, you fight him back. Don't come around here to try to get me." Had Colton been a few years older, he might have left that encounter in a body bag. That wasn't the last of Colton's interactions with Smiley, not by a long shot. One day when Colton saw Smiley driving down the street, Smiley picked him up. They played dice for a while, and then Smiley brought him to his house. Smiley did not match the stereotype of a typical gangbanger, with the father absence and poverty. His parents lived at home, and the family were middle class, despite the common economic standard observed around the neighborhood. Smiley would become a mentor of sorts for Colton. They played football, dice, listened to music, and smoked weed. Smiley said to him, "You're like me. Just like me. Both of us, middle sons. We think the same way, want the same things. You're not as aggressive or smart, but you're younger." He gave Colton a gentle knock upside the head and said, "Don't worry. I'ma toughen you up, though. Make you hardcore." One day in spring, when Colton was 10, Smiley said, "What you doing tomorrow night, cuz?" "I'll be at Mom's after my game. I want you to claim the set. I got love for you, like a brother, cuz." Colton was elated. He never knew he belonged somewhere. However, he resolved to keep his cool about it, like Smiley would. He said, "Cool. Way I figure is, you got the heart to be a down rip. Tomorrow night, cuz." It used to be that what gave Colton a sense of accomplishment and belonging was his position in Little League. Now he was about to become a Crip, and it became a new distraction. Though his father had had some involvement in his life, it wasn't nearly enough. Soon after Colton returned home and changed out of his baseball uniform, he left the house to meet up with Smiley. As soon as he laid eyes on Colton, Smiley said, "Hey, what's up, cuz?" Colton felt like he was truly at home in Smiley's world. Not the house Smiley's family occupied, the world of the Crips. Smiley took him through an alley where some of the local Crips hung out. Because they didn't recognize Colton, they were not exactly welcoming to him at first. He was the recipient of the evil eye from many. Colton was on edge. He urged himself to stay focused. He grinned and did his best to appear indifferent to their hostility. One of them was named TJ, who was 16 years old, 6 feet tall, and a practitioner of martial arts. The week before, he took Smiley and Colton for a ride to Rodeo Drive in a stolen car. No time to indulge in nostalgia. Colton needed to focus on the moment. TJ said to him, "Here you go, cuz." He passed him a joint. By then, Colton was a veteran pothead. Big T was 15 years old and bench-pressed over 300 pounds. He was not pleased to see Colton, not just because he wasn't a member, but also because of his fair complexion. He was the second most powerful figure in the gang's hierarchy. In the absence of the leader, it was unwise to question the orders of Big T. He said, "What's your name, cuz?" "Colton." "You the same Colton that knocked out that fool Bebop from Black Peastone?" Colton was able to relax a little now. Black Peastone was a member of the Bloods, the sworn enemy of the Crips. Colton said, "Yeah." Big T said, "Shit." Big Mel said to Colton, "What's up, homie? I'm Big Mel. You down, huh?" He passed Smiley a brown bag. TJ said, "Man, cuz might be small, but he's got heart. Me and Smiley want him to claim the set." Smiley said, "Yeah, with the right guidance, he could be a down rip." Smiley took a swig from the bottle in his bag. He passed it to Colton. Colton had a swig and passed it on. Smiley said to Colton, "Crippin' ain't easy. You gotta stay down and represent to the fullest. You know what this means, cuz?" Before Colton could say a word, Big T said, "Means every member gotta fight, stab, shoot, and whatever it takes to destroy the enemy. We're at war with the Bloods. They try to kill us, so we kill them first. It's them or us. Either you with it or you get got. And whatever you do, you can't be a buster." "Buster?" TJ says, "Coward. Gotta stay hard and fight." Big T said, "You with it?" Colton said, "I'm down." Colton was waiting for their discussion about his worthiness to join their set. Instead, Smiley said, "When I say run, run down the alley and don't stop." Colton took a look down the alley. When he turned back to Smiley's boys, Terry was loading guns. Smiley said, "Run." This was no playful suggestion. This was no game. Smiley wasn't smiling. This was an order. Anybody serious about joining the Crips obeyed all orders. Colton took off. It was dark, with little in the way to illuminate his path. Fortunately, he was an athlete. The Crips began to fire in his direction. He continued to run as bullets punctured objects within the immediate vicinity. He urged himself to keep running, and fast. He had no idea if they really intended to kill him or not. All he knew was that these guys were not to be fucked with. They were not playing. Having reached the end, Smiley and TJ appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Smiley punched him in the face so hard, Colton fell to the ground. Colton was dizzy, but began swinging. Big T appeared from around the corner. 3 of them were beating up on Colton. TJ punched him 5 times on his chest, and Colton fell to the pavement, struggling to regain his equilibrium. This was shaping up to be a typical gang initiation. Colton gasped for breath after being kicked in the stomach. Smiley told him he would toughen him up. He told him he would end up hardcore. Somebody said, "Squab for yours, cuz." He was grabbed by the collar. Somebody pulled him to his feet. They kicked him in his chest. He was kicked again and punched. Punches came in all directions from all 3 men, from all 3 angles. He was a punching bag. He was literally seeing the stars at this point. He knew that he had to prove that he could take it like a man and not cry. He could not show pain or fear. He struck at them when he could, landing the occasional blow and surprising them with how hard he could punch for a 10-year-old. As if on cue, suddenly the punches and kicks stopped. Colton regained full consciousness. His nose was bleeding profusely. There was pulsating pain in his torso and the rest of his body. When he regained his footing, he started swinging around in all directions. Smiley wasn't having it. He said, "That's enough." For a moment, everything returned to normal, after it appeared that the entire world had been spinning. Smiley wrapped his arms around him. "You're in, cuz. One of us. Little C." Big T hugged him. TJ hugged him and patted him on the back. Big Mel said, "You all right, little homie?" Big T got underneath their car and pulled out some guns. 238 specials and a 12-gauge shotgun with a sawed-off barrel and pistol grip handle. Smiley handed Colton a 38 and said, "Here, see." Terry gave Big T some joints and a can of Old English beer. Colton lit a joint and passed the rest to Big Mel. Smiley made an announcement. "Check this out. We're gonna blast some Inglewood faggots tonight." Colton said, "Right." Smiley continued, "The fools blasted on Nelsie's car yesterday, and we gonna serve they ass for that shit. We gonna let them clowns know they ain't no bustas from over this way." Nelsie was a prominent member of the Crips from the Rollin' 60s set, a ghetto celebrity of sorts. He was so well known as such that Colton had already heard about the drive-by shooting in question through his elementary school's rumor mill. Smiley said, "We gon' chop them fools down." Given that it was the night of Colton's initiation, it was likely incumbent upon him to, quote, "make his bones," end quote, as they put it in the Mafia. It sure looked that way as Colton and the rest of his newfound Crip brethren put blue bandanas on their faces in a fashion reminiscent of bank robbers from the Old West. Smiley gave everybody their marching orders. "All of us gotta have aliases in case we get busted. Mine is Johnny Carson." TJ said, "I'm Raymond." Smiley said, "Colton, what's your name?" Colton decided to go by Damone. Smiley said, "If we get caught, none of us know each other." They all nodded their compliance. Just then, a member named Vic pulled up in a white ice cream truck. He too was wearing the customary blue bandana. Smiley said, "Let's roll." He put his 38 in the waistband of his pants. Colton did the same with his and got in the back of the van. Though there was no way Colton was going to back out, he was nevertheless terrified. He was going to commit his first murder. He smoked a joint to alleviate his anxiety, but he could not tune out the reality of what he was about to do. His heart was pounding. Committing your first murder at any age would be difficult for most people, but for a 10-year-old, it would be potentially traumatic. He kept telling himself that he could do it. When they arrived in the Blood Hood, their eyes were peeled for the telltale red clothing. Suddenly Smiley whispered, "There they go." He had spotted a member of the Inglewood Bloods named Bay, pumping gas as two other Bloods sat in the front seat. As far as Smiley was concerned, this was the best-case scenario, as reflected in the next statement. "Look, them fools don't even see us comin', cuz. They sleepin'." They pulled around the side of the gas station. Smiley and Colton jumped out of the truck. Smiley said, "We're going to creep up behind the gas pumps so they can't see us, and then jump in front of their car and bust." He inspected Colton's gun to make sure it was fully loaded and ready to fire. Smiley said, "Got it?" Colton said, "Yeah." They ducked. Colton thought to himself, "This is my chance to prove myself." They snuck up from behind until they were 5 feet away from their vehicle. Colton thought, "If Smiley can do it, I can." With a shift of gravel, Bay turned and saw the Crips. He was startled. He pulled out his gun and aimed it at Smiley. He tried to shoot him but missed. He ran off. Colton fired several shots, but they missed. Smiley got up on the hood of the Blood's car and shot at the men in the front seat. Colton got up on the hood and fired shots at both men. He wounded them both. Innocent bystanders nearby panicked and screamed as they ran for cover. Smiley caught up with Bay and pistol-whipped him until he fell to the ground. Smiley said, "That's for Nelsie, punk." Colton shot his guns clear of ammo. The men he shot were no longer moaning from the pain. Colton departed from the car and ran to the rendezvous point to jump in the ice cream truck. The adrenaline and intensity of the experience were exhilarating for Colton. He thought, "I can do anything." C handled his business, said Smiley once they were back at home. Smiley took a swig from a bottle of Hennessy and passed it to Colton. Big T took a pull off a joint, handed it to Smiley, and said, "Yeah, right." Unlike Smiley, Big T didn't see as much potential in Colton. It was understandable. He was only 10 years old. TJ had Colton's back, though. He said, "I told y'all, Colton is down." After other affirmations, they gave Colton some gifts, like a bag of marijuana and a blue bandana. Smiley nodded in the direction of the .38 in Colton's waistband. He said, "It's yours now. Don't get caught with that. It has shootings on it. Now you're from the set. You gotta be packing, 'cause motherfuckers don't like us." Indeed, now that Colton was officially a Crip, he inherited a position in the never-ending war between the Crips and the Bloods. Smiley said, "Banging is for real. It's a full-time job. You'll be claiming 24/7 and having no love for the other side. Understand, little C?" Colton said, patting the blue bandana, "I know what's up. I won't get caught with the gun." Hence, Smiley was his road dog, their terminology for a running buddy, best friend, somebody he would literally kill for. In the morning, Colton reflected on what he did the night before, and he wished it could be undone. He didn't think he would be able to kill anybody again. Perhaps guilt was a rookie thing. For now, he had to accept that there was no turning back. To quote Colton, "Smiley's warm laughter from the night before fills my head. I can't tell anyone of this feeling of guilt. To do so will shame me. I'm part of the Crip army, a comrade. I am Lil C. I am 10. The remorse was short-lived. It was a feeling that would only make it harder for him to do his duty as a Crip. When called upon, he would have to draw blood to defeat Bloods. It was his code. To quote his internal monologue from those years, "I'm a Crip. You're a Blood. I see you. I'm going to kill you. You see me. You're going to kill me."
Color, 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 color. I am a nightmare walking, psychopath talking. King of my jungle, just a gangster stalking, living life like a firecracker, quick as my fuse. Been dead as a death, that's the colors I choose. Red or blue, cause of blood, it just don't matter. Sucker died for your life when my shotgun scatters. Color. The gangs of LA will never die. Just multiply colors. Colors. Colors.
Colton and Damone were bused to a junior high school whose student body was mostly comprised of Caucasians. After Colton had a fight with a couple of white students, he told Damone what happened. Damone said, "You crazy, Colton. Loco." The handle of Loco stuck, but was shortened to Loke. Eventually, Colton's gang name became Lil C Loke. One day, Colton and a friend called Black Ant were driving on Colton's motorcycle from a repair shop when Colton spotted T-Bone, a member of the Black Peastone Bloods. Typically, he should have shot him, but before he could do anything, T-Bone threw a brick at him. Colton lost control of the motorcycle and collided into a parked car. Colton flew off the motorcycle and was seriously injured. Seeing Colton's vulnerability, Black Ant grabbed his .38 and ran after T-Bone. When T-Bone returned, he said, "Damn, C, you all right, homie? You get him?" Chased him to 10th and planted 2 slugs in his chest. Call my grandmother. Despite having a concussion, a sprained arm, a sprained knee, and abrasions on his arms, shoulder, and back, he could not expect mercy from his enemy, and he would look like a fool if he had waited around for the Bloods to find him. Black Ant took him to an area known as the Jungles, Blood Territory. They didn't find T-Bone, but they did spot 2 Bloods in an alley by the names of Paydog and Little Roo. They shot at a Crips house a few days prior. Colton said, "What's up, Blood?" Paydog says, "Where are you from?" Expecting nothing, the Bloods were vulnerable. Colton pulled out his .38 and hid it within his hand. He said, "Get a little closer." Paydog moved his hand toward his waistband. He said, "Fool, this is what's up." Colton and Black Ant were back on the road before Paydog hit the ground. Colton was arrested a week later. He was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and was remanded to juvenile hall. There were no witnesses, so the case was dismissed. The Bloods may hate the Crips, but the one thing that's worse than being a Crip, as far as they're concerned, is being a snitch. They want to control their own fates with their own form of justice. Snitching will earn you a premature death. Colton made money by selling marijuana and committing petty crimes, like purse snatchings. Eventually he graduated to committing armed robbery, primarily in jewelry stores. He represented the Crips as expected by doing what was known as a walk-up. It meant spotting a Blood and walking up to him and shooting him point blank. Colton was anxious to become a ghetto celebrity in his own right, and Smiley was only too keen to capitalize on his hunger for that status. Colton became Smiley's rider, his soldier, physical assault, stabbing, shootings. Whatever violent act he wanted to be carried out, Colton was ready to do his bidding. He wanted the reputation, power, and respect of a gangster. Colton stopped going to school after being expelled from the 8th grade. By then he had been remanded a second time to juvenile hall for a theft-related charge. There were Bloods in the facility and tensions mounted. He fought constantly with them. They happened to be from the same set as Paydog and T-Bone. When Colton was released, he found that his time on the inside endowed him with the advantage of a reputation as rugged and raw. As far as avoiding the gang life in those neighborhoods goes, Colton said, "There's no, I don't want to get involved in gang banging. If you live in the hood, you're in it. Victim or perpetrator, the choice is yours." The Harlem Crips split into 3 squads, more commonly known as sets. Colton's set was known as the Avenues. Half of the day was spent hustling for money, the other half gangbanging. He got used to a life going to sleep to the sound of ambulance sirens and police helicopters hovering above. Granted, this was something that everybody in the neighborhood accepted. For his participation in the successful robbery of a jewelry store, Colton received over $44,000. He reflected on his position in the world following the incident. "At last, I have a gangster's car, squared off in front and to back, long and lean on the sides, jerking and twitching like a cat about to pounce when I ignite her. The ideal lowrider. I like the minimal gray color, almost like air, a ghost color. I spend the rest on gang-banging attire, guns, marijuana, a little cocaine, and alcohol. I've done it. I'm totally equipped, totally down. 14 years old and on the way to achieve my celebrity. Consumption and violence are my validations. Gangsters do what they want. Civilians do what they can. During the robbery, adults did what I told them. Stores across LA are lavishly crammed with glimmering gold and sparkling stones. Twinkling glass waits to be smashed. Money on the vine to be harvested. Colton's crew carefully honed and polished their robbery techniques. They would do things like set off firecrackers in another part of the mall to throw off the security guards. Unlike many other gangbangers, Colton and his set didn't do drive-by shootings. They stuck with the walk-ups. They were only interested in killing the enemy, never civilians. Colton once said, "Bangin' is more than my career. It's my refuge, the ultimate getaway. The choice is mine." He also said, "We're at war with the Bloods, and both of us are at war with the police. The Black Pig War is fought all over LA." Indeed, Colton had been assaulted and threatened by the LAPD, as many of his friends had. Smiley once threatened to kill a police officer when he was being harassed. It was all a part of life in South Central Los Angeles. Colton wasn't interested in being in a relationship with a woman at this point. As he put it, "I'm always on the go being a hustler, not really into women. Money, power, wealth, being able to do whatever you want to do is liberation. No one controls me. I'm in love with the streets. When I drive down the street in a nice car, in the mix with my homies, a ghetto celebrity wearing designer clothes, big gold watch, gold chains, gold earrings. People see me, praise me, and I lap it up. That life is my love. I can't be in love with a woman. The camaraderie members share is a known thing. It ain't no fun if the homie can't have none, we tell each other." But he did develop a special bond with Smiley's sister Gina. She didn't want him to be involved in the robberies and other Crip business, but there was no getting out for him. She should have known that from her brother's experience. She tried to talk him out of participating in an armed robbery. As she said to him, "Got a strange feeling, Colton. Something weird. Something different. Wait." Her premonition was spot on. He and his comrades were arrested soon after the robbery. Initially, Colton was remanded to Central Juvenile Hall. He broke a white guy's nose for calling him a racial epithet. He was placed in lockup for a month before he was transferred to Youth Authority. He was sentenced to 7 years and began that stretch in earnest at Fred C. Nell's School for Boys. This was a problem. Crips aren't just at war with the Bloods. Some Crip sets are in conflict with other Crip sets. For instance, the Rollin' 60s Crips have it in with the Rollin' 30s. There were several Rollin' 60s Crips in this institution, and they knew who Colton was. They had axes to grind and fully intended to swing them. Some of them stepped to him with the intention of intimidating him, or worse. Colton refused to give them the impression that he was a buster. He said, "Fool, I ain't from the 60s. I'm from Harlem. I live in the avenues." "What street you live on?" "Second Avenue." Colton held his stare, knowing that to look away was a sign of fear and weakness. Other 60s approached and closed in on him. Colton puffed out his chest. One of them said, "Who you run with? Who put you on the set?" This is what Colton called a death challenge. Like a game of Jeopardy, where a wrong answer could have resulted in him being murdered. He could also have ended up dead for being caught in a lie. Colton said, Smiley, Big T, and Terry. The 60s erased all his personal space. They were pressing him into their circle from all sides. The interrogator said, Man, how old are you? I'm a 60 known as River Rat from East Coast pulled a knife from his waist and put it against Colton's throat. Colton said, 15. I'll be 16 next month. Shit, Smiley's is 20. You don't know him. I live around the corner from Smiley. His sister Gina is my girl. A droplet of blood dripped down Colton's neck. Another 60 said, Hold up, Ray. Smiley do got a sister named Gina. Colton said he has 2 sisters. An African-American counselor spotted the swarming and shouted, Break it up! Break it up! All of them dispersed except for one. He extended his hand and said, What's up, cuz? I'm Baby Rock from West Side Harlem Crip, Danker Parkside. He was the first person from the hood to kill a black pea stone. Colton said, They call me Little Sea-Loke. Crazy Colton? You with Smiley when he shot that fool Little Roo from Black Piss Stain, right? After an interview with the counselor, Colton returned to the cell to find that all his belongings were stolen, including a photograph of Gina. After doing some networking, he was told that a blood named D stole his possessions. He knew he had to retaliate because if he hadn't, he would have developed a reputation for being extortable or as a buster. Gang affiliation or not, this is a big no-no in prison. Though D was much bigger than him, Colton made short work of him. When Colton returned to the cell, he received a box with all his property inside. It turned out that it was a setup to find out if he was a soldier or a buster. At one point, Colton received a letter from Gina in which she told him she met another man and was moving on with her life. She told him she would no longer be writing him. Colton was transferred to a facility at Fenner Canyon. There he met and bunked with other Crips. He was involved with sports at this facility. His coach urged him to consider a future beyond the Crips. He pushed him to get a GED. He would push him to learn complicated mathematics, like algebra. At that time in his life, it was meaningless to Colton. As he put it, I have enough unknowns to decipher. Am I going to live past 21? Will Gina come back to me? Which one of my set will be killed next? Is there a strategy I can construct to prevent it? Math can't stop a bullet or put money in my pocket. I shake my head. What am I doing this for? I'm conditioned to simple things. You shoot me, I shoot you. You make money, I take it. You play the pig and I play the criminal. You yell stop and I run. Life in South Central is uncomplicated. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out what to do during a war. Coach Brown had a reality check for him. You're not the same person that ran the streets. You have to prove it. The GED and remaining discipline will prove it to the parole board. Colton wasn't buying it. He had proven to be above average in talent on the basketball court. Brown said, a basketball scout, Mr. Grant, will be at the final game. With that GED, you could get a scholarship. Brown smiled. Another mentor with a notable smile. Brown must have made an impact on Colton, for he no longer dedicated so many of his thoughts and dreams to his life with the Crips. He now spent much of his time dreaming of being in the NBA. One day, after returning from a furlough, which Colton earned through being discipline-free for a prolonged period and for sticking to his GED studies, Coach Brown conveyed his pride to him. You're the first guy on the team to win a furlough. Don't you know that gangbanging isn't for you, see? You gotta understand that you have choices. You're aggressive. You need something to occupy your time and your mind that provides release for the bottled up energy. But you have choices how you use it. A member of Colton's set called Crazy Q was murdered, and somehow Coach Brown found out about it. He said, "I heard about your homeboy, Crazy Q. Sorry. Sometime I don't know why I keep going on." Coach Brown looked at him with a greater concentration, narrowing his eyes. Colton continued, saying, "I wish I were dead." Brown said, "What are you talking about? You've your whole life ahead." Colton regretted revealing this much. He said, "I just lose it sometimes." Brown said, "We all lose it sometimes. That's part of life." Colton thought, "The man is like a father to me, I think." Colton smiled at Brown. He thought, "He'll be here for me. I can count on him. Hey, I'm going to be gone for a few days. Stay out of trouble." "All right." They slapped hands. "If 50 plus x2 equals 110, what's x2? Colton said, 10. 10. As Brown walked away, he shouted, "Remember, stay cool." Colton didn't stay cool. He got into a fight with the Blood while Brown was gone. Brown cut him from the basketball team. He became disillusioned with Colton. March 1984. Colton got early parole after serving 3 years and 3 months. He was almost 19. Things changed in Colton's set by the time he returned. Many of his fellow Crips died. Others, including Smiley, were in prison. Crack changed life in the hood, both for the people who became addicted and the dealers who profited. Smiley was one of the crackheads who turned to armed robbery to feed his addiction. Colton decides to try a legitimate life by working a straight job and pursuing his education. Suddenly, the gangbanging life didn't look nearly as glamorous. Whether they were in prison or on the brink of an overdose, crack was destroying everybody's lives. He did not enjoy his job flipping burgers. He was also saddened that his friends, like Smiley, were languishing in prison. Colton avoided most of the obligations of the Crips. He spotted Bloods in public, but often let them go about their business if it didn't catch the attention of other Crips. They would have considered such an action to be treasonous. The way he felt was he had more important things to do than kill a man just because he was wearing a different color of bandana. He still would have killed for his closest friends, but otherwise it was something he was anxious to steer clear from. However, Smiley being one of those homies he would gladly kill and die for, he couldn't help but contribute his assistance when he found out he needed to help. G said to him, "You coming or what? Let's roll." Colton went with them to the hood to recruit some soldiers. Their intention was to carry out a jewelry store robbery. Half of the proceeds would go to Smiley's attorney, and the other would be divvied up among the crew. They needed a getaway driver. According to Colton, women were better in this role because the police were slower to pull them over. They met a girl who was addicted to crack. She didn't need much persuasion when offered the monetary rewards. It was a successful robbery. Colton was now an inveterate recidivist. Case in point, when he was involved in the robbery with a few of his Crip friends to produce some firearms, he was caught by police. His parole officer was contacted, and he was not given bail. He was remanded to Los Angeles County Jail. Colton wound up staying in a module populated with several Crips, TJ among them. That segment of the prison population was dubbed by inmates as Cripville. Because he was a Crip, he was officially designated a danger to the United States of America. This housing unit was created by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Operation Safe Street to put an end to gang violence and instill order in the jail. Terry gave a more realistic appraisal of the program. Instead, it's our training station, 'cause I've learned all kind of shit in here with the homies. I learned how to resist the pigs. I've learned the philosophy and history of being a Crip. My head is where my heart always was, see? It's a tough jail where there is no access to a law library and few other privileges that inmates in other institutions take for granted. Years before, the inmates carried out a riot because the air conditioning system broke down and the administration refused to repair it. Conditions weren't quite as draconian and Spartan as they were in those days, but they weren't much better. In Cripville, inmates would learn ways to get things like extra soap and coffee. The staff watched them through glass ceilings like the inmates were bacteria under a microscope. Colton was sentenced to 16 months at Chino as part of a plea bargain. Colton's long-range goal in Chino was to become a celebrity just like he endeavored to become a ghetto celebrity as a Crip on the street. It is a place where status isn't earned with words, but with actions. Colton described the atmosphere in Chino. Under the gauze of mellowness, intensity prowls. Everyone churns inside. The easy sprawl hides a pounding heart and watchful eyes. The man with a tower over the face only pretends sleep. His eyes are open, his ears quickened for the slightest abrupt sound. The population is overcrowded with gang members. There are only a few civilians. Any moment, conflict can erupt. The first murder to which Colton was assigned in Chino was what he and other Crips referred to as a get-back, revenge for the murder of one of their own by a Blood. He attacked the Blood, who was known as Spider, with a shank, but was disrupted by staff before he could do any lasting damage. The administration got wind of it and decided to teach him a lesson. A corrections officer said to Colton, "You think you're tough? We'll show you what tough is." Another CO pounded Colton across his face with a baton. Colton's face began to pour with blood. A CO said, "Who the fuck you get your orders from?" "Don't know what you're talking about." "Don't talk back to me, boy." A third CO whacked him in his teeth with his baton. Another baton struck him in his temple. One of them addressed him using racial epithets. "Tell us what happened." He cut his face and Colton fell to the floor. "You think you hard? You ain't shit." He kicked Colton in the head. Another CO kicked him in the groin. He was kicked in his head again and was knocked unconscious. The next day Colton woke to head-to-toe pain. His face was caked with dried blood. There was nothing in his cell except his boxer shorts and socks. No bedding, no other clothes. Just unlimited water from a tap and a filthy towel he used to clean his face and mop the floor. He soaked up so much blood it swirled down a drain. He was in agony, but he also earned a stripe, so to speak. He showed he could take a beating like a man. It was a lot like when he was initiated into the Crips as a 10-year-old boy. For the assault, the sentence proposed was an additional year, including 18 months in a security housing unit, or SHU, in other words, solitary confinement, or the hole. Fortunately, Spider testified on Colton's behalf at the hearing, and the charges were dropped. Colton wouldn't shirk his duties as a Crip, and he assaulted another inmate. He was placed in the shoe, the worst time one can serve. A corrections officer had sympathy for Colton, knowing he was his own worst enemy, more so than any blood. He knew he was avenging the assaults and murders of his fellow Crips. He said, "Look, you've only got 16 months. Do your time, go home, and make a life. Look, I know where you are. I know your family. I used to watch your father play ball for the Angels back in '65. I remember when your uncle, Albert, was police sergeant for the LAPD. Your grandfather used to cut my hair. Look, why you want to be the black sheep? Why you want to be a thug? It ain't worth it, man. I'm telling you, Simpson, those Crips are going to use you and mess up your life. Be cool, or you'll wind up spending the rest of your life here. Right here." Colton tried to get a word in edgewise. "I didn't." The CO resumed his speech. "Nah, don't. Don't even open your mouth. I don't want to hear your lies. I've heard all the lies a person can hear. I've worked here 13 years. What, you think I was born yesterday? I'm not one of those white cops that don't know nothing. Why you think they pay me? They pay me because I know. Look, take my advice. Be cool. Make it out of here in one piece." Soon Colton is escorted to what could have been, for him, been considered an all-time low. He was taken to the shoe. After he was uncuffed, he was ordered to strip naked. A goon squad officer said, "Let me see the palms of your hands." Colton did as he was told. The officer said, "Flip them over." More orders. "Raise your arms above your head so I can see your armpits. Drop them and open your mouth wide. Do you wear dentures? Stick out your tongue. Lift your lips with your fingers and expose your gums. Turn around and lift your left foot toward me. Now wiggle your toes. Now your right foot. Lift your sack. Touch your toes. Spread the cheeks of your behind. Hold them apart. Now cough." Colton felt humiliated as the guard penetrated his anus looking for contraband. The guard slammed the door and left Colton isolated. His bed was a slab of concrete, about the size of a common bus stop bench. The sink and toilet were connected. He could smell the odors of feces and vomit. There was no light source. The guard covered the small window in the door with a steel plate. Colton was bathed in darkness. It was so dark he couldn't see his hand in front of his face. So dark he was effectively blind. He kept telling himself that he could make it. He had been abused before. His mother would do things like hit him with extension cords and with skillets. She would use harsh chemicals to straighten his hair because she was ashamed of his dark complexion. She was ashamed of him and tried to hide him from the world due to her self-loathing regarding her racial identity. He told himself, "You can make it. You can make it." A voice with a southern accent said, "Chow time." A rap on the door. The metal covering on the door was pulled aside. The light was hard on Colton's eyes after the absolute darkness. A guard slid a paper plate with what would be considered a child's portion of eggs and ham. It came with a half pint of spoiled milk. He had competitors for his food, a pack of rats. They nibbled at it until he shambled over, and they fled for cover. He dumped the food into the toilet and flushed it down. The metal plate was pulled across, reinstating the darkness. After the toilet's plumbing settled, the only sounds he heard were those of the rats scurrying around the floor. The cell was so small that when he reached outwards, he could touch both walls at the same time. He lay down on the so-called bed. He reflected on the pivotal decisions that affected the course of his life, adding his own commentary as he did so. But it was do or die, kill or be killed. Don't think of that. I had to. There's no second guessing. If I didn't get them, they'd get me. No, you had choices. Not just one choice. If you truly wanted to survive, why did you join the gang where black men die in dog years? You knew. You truly knew. You can make it. Maybe I didn't want to survive. Maybe there wasn't much to live for. No, you lust for that celebrity, that fame, power, admiration. The gang is your clearest vision of stability. No, it was me, my loyalty and deeds. Later, Colton was given what was called a jute ball, a ball of nondescript mystery meat, perhaps. He pushed it back out before the rats could get at it. His only source of amusement were the light patterns he saw behind his eyelids in the dark. He reflected on his current situation. I'm blind, locked away from civilization, from everyone, forgotten. No one even knows I'm here. No one who matters. Not Grandma Louise, or Pops, or Smiley, or Gina, or Huckabuck. He cried as he realized that Colton was dead and he was only sea-loke. He continued to reject food. He reminisced on some of the better times of his life to take his mind off of the wretched conditions in which he found himself. The next day he thought, you assume you can control your fate by shooting another person, but you don't really know if he'd kill you. Not really. He could give you a pass, but you can't take the chance. You love life too much. You love living. I love life. I do. Some may think, since I put myself in harm's way, I don't care if I live or die. But it's my love of life that pushes me to danger. Yes, I want to ensure my safety. But it's more than that. It's the excitement when I'm on the verge of possibly dying that reminds me of living. A life that speeds by with excitement. Euphoria, pleasure, brings us closer to death, and the fine line between them provokes an awareness we can't otherwise experience. But even the ordinary is sweet. To enjoy a Twix, a cup of water even, to shoot a basketball and hear it whoosh through the hoop. I love being able to do these things. I'm remorseful about the others. They're human beings, but I'm justified. After a couple of days in the worst confinement he would endure, he was transferred to what was referred to as Palm Hall. He got a shower, clean clothes, a fresh sack lunch, and a single-man cell that smelled like ammonia. There was a light, a bed with springs, a cotton mattress, and a barred iron door. It was practically luxurious compared to the previous conditions. At what was called a 115 hearing for assaulting an inmate known as Sporty, Colton was found guilty of battery on an inmate and inciting a riot. He was slapped with a 6-month SHU program and an additional 108 days tacked onto his sentence. He was transferred to Folsom Prison and directly to the SHU unit, otherwise known as the Hole. Reflecting on the mentors he had at the previous institution, he thinks, there are others like you. Everything you'll need to know will be taught. You can make it. Colton spent 6 months in the SHU. His reputation preceded him. Crips knew he was coming and gave him a warm welcome. Nevertheless, no prison is without undercurrents of hostility. To ensure he was prepared for attack, Colton fashioned a 6-inch steel rod from an item in the kitchen. He sharpened one end until it was so sharp he could have taken an eye out with minimal effort. He was almost attacked for not conforming to the regimens and orientation expected of a set of Crips in the prison. His comrades of his own set intervened and dispersed those who had posed a threat to him. They eventually apologized and left him alone. There isn't always solidarity between Crip sets. Sometimes there are wars that are worse than those between the Crips and the Bloods. It's known on the street as set trippin'. At this point in Colton's sentence, his set was engaged in a veritable civil war with another set. With every murder, a Crip enjoys an upgrade in status. Colton was transferred to an institution that was likely known for being much less of a hotbed of gang activity. CRC, or California Rehabilitation Center. Inmates in California are never housed in one institution for long. This is because the longer they stay, the more they will aspire to acquire status, and they achieve that goal with acts of violence and other transgressive activity. He became a chess enthusiast. He had a mentor he played with. One day his mentor said, "Never make a move before weighing the potential consequences. If you do, you'll make deadly mistakes, mistakes that can cost your life. More than likely, you'll lose the war, not because you're weaker, but because you played into their plot. Keep thinking as far down the line as you can. I think 10 moves ahead. The person who wins the game is the person who thinks the farthest." He once believed that joining the Crips was the best way to become affluent and powerful in a country that was racist and would deny him opportunities to transcend his inauspicious background. Now he realized that being a Crip was a trajectory that, for most, led to a fork in the road, one leading to the grave and the other to a prison cell. Long-term success was rare, as were long lives. How many 85-year-old Crips are there? Even in prison, it's a fate that whittles down your expiration date by several dozen digits. As his chess mentor, Lafayette, said, "George says that young brothers in prison believe they don't need tactics. Being a brave warrior is enough, but without direction, there'll be unclaimed bodies in the morgue." Another day, Lafayette said, "What do you feel when you read about a white man killing a black man?" "Angry." "Why?" "'Cause it ain't right." "You're a gangbanger, right? And your set is Harlem Crips, right?" "Yeah." "As a Crip, your job is to kill bloods, right? You feel killing a black man isn't right. Then answer my question. Why do you gangbang?" Suddenly Colton realized how hypocritical it was to be outraged by white-on-black crime while he was prepared to kill another black man just because they wore red clothing. Still, Colton wasn't entirely sold in this argument. Lafayette said, "Hey brother, don't get angry. All I did was ask a few questions. If you want to get mad at someone, get mad at yourself. It's not in your heart to kill another black man. If killing a black man is wrong, you realize being a gangbanger is wrong. You don't believe in what the Crips are doing, what you've done. You just told me that." Colton said, "I like what I've been doing. Them slobs been shooting at me and my homies. Do you know how many of them have died? I know what I'm doing. Think how your family would feel if you got killed. Think how you would feel when you learn one of your homies got killed. The way you feel is the same as they feel. It ain't you, see. I see it in your face, brother." He let Colton digest what he had been telling him and said, "Just think about it." August 1985. Colton was paroled early for good behavior. His neighborhood was even more run down and decrepit than it was before he went away. Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economics sure hadn't trickled down to that neck of the woods. There were still bars on everybody's windows. There was so much gun violence. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, even if nobody had been shot within the hour. While making some small talk with a gathering of his fellow Crips after returning, there was a drive-by shooting. Those incidents were never few and far between. Such an occurrence doesn't discourage gang members, it only motivates them to escalate the gangbanging. As Colton reflected after a Crip named Tiki was murdered, Tiki's murder and the drive-by reinforce my belief that the more enemies I eliminate, The more stores I rob, the bigger my reputation, the greater the proof of my invincibility, and, thus, the odds of my continued existence. If I have 100 enemies and knock out 50, then I've doubled my odds of living. I buy my own life with the death of others. However, now that he was sober, he realized how distorted this perspective was. Poverty is another motivating factor that drives young people into criminal activity. I know from personal experience what it is like to play the game by society's rules, applying endlessly for legitimate employment and being rejected, often when it came to positions for which I was overqualified. In those situations, I understood how someone might do something like traffic narcotics to make a living. There are politicians who lobby against the raising of the minimum wage and then wonder how people living in poverty could possibly involve themselves with crime. There are educated people who struggle to find employment. In South Central Los Angeles, there are African Americans employed in legitimate jobs whose tax dollars pay the police officers who harass their young men. Typically, the unemployment rate in South Central Los Angeles for black men is about 30%. The national average is 5%. These days, with rampant inflation, it is getting harder to make rent, and the picture for the poor and working class is increasingly bleak in terms of social mobility. The best manufacturing jobs have mostly been outsourced to the third world, with little left over except the minimum wage service industry. It's not an excuse for selling crack over flipping burgers, but it pays to at least understand the situation. It didn't help that Colton's prospects of obtaining legitimate employment were grim due to being a high school dropout and an ex-con. We want parolees to get regular jobs and stay out of jail, but we do nothing to alleviate this form of discrimination. Until that happens, your tax dollars continue to finance recidivism. It didn't help that crack made it possible for some of the drug dealers to get paid more than the people who were trying to put them behind bars for trafficking. In fact, in 1989, the U.S. Attorney General described the Bloods and Crips as the nation's most powerful crack trafficking ring. With their highly profitable enterprise came an alarmingly high escalation of gun violence in inner-city neighborhoods. Dealers continually battled each other for dominance, and turf wars left the streets of these neighborhoods running with blood. Ultimately, after a raucous welcome home party with his homies, Colton participated in the robbery of a store. Easy money is seductive, and he was falling back into his old ways. Before long, Colton was a full-time Crip again. He was drinking and doing drugs. He was killing Bloods, robbing retail businesses. He refrained from any Crip-on-Crip violence. He had that much self-restraint. He also limited his involvement with women since he had to dedicate his time to making money. One day, Gina confronted Colton about the fact that he had fallen back into crime. She said, "You don't have to steal, though, Colton. Your family has money. Everyone respects you. You have everything you need. How come you can't just slow down?" He couldn't disagree with her. He thought, how can I justify something I don't know how to explain? Something I don't even understand myself. I'm engulfed in crime as if it's some contagious disease that no one knows how to cure. I've caught it. Become it. Gina went on. Last time you didn't listen to me, and look what happened. Smiley didn't listen, and look what happened. I get this feeling, this crazy feeling, this twisting inside, sick feeling that something bad's coming. He assured her that nothing bad was going to happen, and urged her not to focus on the negative. He didn't take her premonitions seriously. Over the next few months, he continued to rob jewelry stores for goods he could fence. He and his homies would still roll through the Blood neighborhoods to waste somebody who had killed one of their friends. Colton was making critical bank and wearing the same kind of jewelry he stole. Where's all that jewelry from Austin's and Perry's and Jim's? The police caught up with Colton after a lengthy investigation into a rash of jewelry store robberies that had been going on since his release from prison. Colton said, "I don't know what you were talking about." The cop pounded Colton in the head with a baton. The impact was so strong his ears rang, and he saw flashing lights. Gina screamed at the cop, "Why are you hitting him? You got him in cuffs. Leave him alone." The cop said to Colton, "Where'd you get that ring?" "Stop hitting him." "I bought it." "With what money?" "Jewelry, man. Jewelry, man. Where's the money from? Crown and Lewis's?" "Money I got from working at office maintenance." Office maintenance was the name of Colton's mother's employer. "Motherfucker, jewelry man. We know all about you. We got a witness." The cop hit him in the head with a billy club again. They pushed him to the floor of the cruiser. They bashed him in the back and kidneys with a baton. Colton thought, "They're going to beat me to death." Gina shouted, "Leave him alone. I see what you're doing. Why you keep hitting him?" A cop says, "Where's all that jewelry? You're under arrest for robbery." Colton thinks, "Which one?" The cop says, "We know all about you. Jewelry man. Mr. Colton Simpson, alias Damone Johnson." They clubbed his right shoulder. Soon after, the cruiser drove him out of the hood. Colton half expected the cops to take him out to the middle of a remote field and kill him. They took him to a processing center. At Parker Center, Colton was taken to the robbery homicide division and beaten again by the cops. He had been free for 6 months. This was the result of 3 months of surveillance. After his initial arraignment, where he was charged with robbery, he was charged at the second arraignment with 2 more counts of robbery, 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder. Colton was remanded to a facility where there were plenty of Crips. The problem was, they were on the verge of set tripping. Nobody knew an outright civil war would break out. They prepared for the pending skirmishes by punching each other to learn to endure the pain. Colton appeared at a sentencing hearing. The judge had overseen a hearing of his before, and he remembered him well. He shook his head and said, "What did I tell you, Simpson? I told you last time you were in youth authority that if I saw you, I was going to be hard on you. You need to get your act together. You have a great family background. You don't have to steal. You don't have to rob. You don't have to be a gangbanger. You don't have to do any of this, and you're out here doing it anyway. You've turned yourself into society's nightmare. You have no remorse. You have no remorse. You put a man in a wheelchair. You've burnt up L.A. with your thievery. I warned you I'd be hard on you, and I'm going to be. I'm going to be." "Never one to show weakness," Colton said. "Can I go? Can I leave?" The judge said, "I'm going to make an example out of you." Colton was still defiant. "Can I go? Can I leave?" The judge gave Colton his sentence. 24 years. I'm sentencing you to 24 years. Even in the face of this, Colton said, "Can I leave now?" The judge said, "You are dismissed." If the judge thought this sentence would correct Colton's behavior, he was mistaken. When Colton was transferred to Chino, he was notified that a Crip known as Black Boy was housed there. Black Boy had assaulted Colton in the past. Colton attacked him in his sleep, first with punches and then with a shank until Black Boy was bleeding. Stabbing someone was a different experience than shooting. There's an intimacy to it. The fact that you are physically escorting someone to the grave hits home with greater profundity. Colton was transferred to Folsom Prison. Throughout the 10-hour commute, he looked outside and reflected on his life as he watched the outside world whiz by. The world looks so exquisite. The green trees, bright flowers, blue sky, mountains, Before it seemed only a battlefield. I passed forests and cars and houses and strip malls, and even once achieve a glimpse of ocean. It's the world of Colton, the world Grandmother Louise tried to open for me, but I shrugged away her dreams as old-fashioned attempts to prepare me for peace, which I thought made me weak. I remember how she made me kneel and pray, get a paper out and save my money. She tried with me. I wonder if I could have had a life as a basketball player. I had the genes and body for it. I loved it. Then, I imagined being a lawyer like my uncle. I did well in school until the streets blurred my concentration. I envisioned my other lives and fall asleep. Rochelle was Colton's latest mentor. Like the others, his eyes were like X-ray specs that detected potential, intelligence, and talent in Colton. He also saw that they were being wasted. One day he said to him, "You still have a life in front of you. Change the way you think and don't allow your anger to affect your future or your present." He noted that Colton had a fearsome temper, and he was a loose cannon when provoked. He knew that such an attribute can land a young man in an early grave or a permanent residency at Club Fed. Rochelle continued, "Don't dig the hole deeper. There's other ways of dealing with the white man and with his politics of hatred. I'll send you some more books, Brother C." The books in question were written by black authors, like Alex Haley, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver, among other titles that were read by the Crips for inspiration. The books made a profound impact on Colton. He stopped using the N-word and urged his fellow Crips to drop it from their vocabularies. They stopped using profanity altogether. They adopted regular exercise routines. They read more. The 4 pillars of their lives in Folsom, as instilled in them by Colton, were discipline, love, loyalty, and understanding. Colton began to build bridges between the various Crip sets, since the violence often escalated to the point of murder. Besides, tensions between the black inmates and the Mexicans were mounting, and an all-out war was well within the realm of possibility. One day a group of 11 corrections officers brought Colton to an isolated area where they beat him. One of them said, "I heard all about you. You're a Harlem Crip, rolling 30s. You one of the head figures over there in the other building, riding back and forth to McGee. You out there making knives, got people exercising, stabbing people." Colton played dumb. He thought, "I'm being moved away from Rochelle. They're afraid of my power and are trying to weaken my influence. They're afraid of Rochelle spreading his gospel, the gospel of black unity." At one point, a guard pointed a rifle at him. Colton thought, "I'm a threat. I'm a threat simply because I'm black. I'm a threat because I listened to Rochelle. I'm a threat because I'm beginning to think instead of react. I'm a threat because I united the blacks for a war against the whites. That's the greatest white nightmare of all. Just think what would happen if we united with the Hispanics." Just then, a medical technician arrived. When the guards saw him, they all changed their tune. Suddenly one of them took the tack of addressing Colton diplomatically. "You know what? You respect our house, and we'll respect you. Leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone. Whatever you got going on with the white boys, don't put us in your shit." When one joins a gang like the Crips, they invite violence into their lives. Whether on the streets or in prison, it is always looming. Even the guards in Folsom became a gang of sorts, with their sights on black inmates. It was a threat by implication when one of the guards said, "Don't bring that shit down here, and we won't fuck with you." February 1st, 1989. Colton got married to Gina. They had been in love for years, but had never officially been an item. It had a lot to do with the fact that Colton was constantly doing time. She had dated another man while he was away and even had 2 children with him, but the deed to her heart was property of one Colton Simpson. They got married in the visiting room. This gave him more motivation to err on the side of self-improvement. They were allowed a 5-hour visitation, complete with non-sexual touching, both of which are usually forbidden in prison visiting rooms. She committed to visiting him every 2 weeks. It's a 5-hour commute both ways, but it was worthwhile as far as she was concerned. She was yet another person who saw the best in Colton and chose to fixate on those attributes. Eventually, they even enjoyed conjugal visits. The blacks and Mexicans went to war over disputes relating to turf within the prison's outdoor sector. Each race would lay claim to weightlifting areas or handball courts. When your world is that small, your propensity for petty squabbles can escalate to all-out warfare. There were many casualties. The surviving wounded typically avoid receiving medical care in the infirmary. Their cuts were sutured or sewn by their homeboys. If every injury had been documented, it would have been like an admission of guilt in the eyes of the prison officials. One day, a pivotal event in the history of Colton Simpson, Crip and inmate, happened which left him at the proverbial fork in the road. Several Bloods approached him while he was lifting weights. Because Colton had been avoiding confrontations and had become more of an intellectual and self-disciplined sort, he was seen as a buster. When one of the Bloods addressed him as such, Colton struggled to figure a way to handle the situation. He didn't want to launch into a skirmish, but he wasn't about to allow somebody to diss him. He thought, I have only 4 years left before I make parole. He had discussed having a baby with Gina, and he wanted to be there every step of the way. Colton got up from the bench and said, Brother, I don't know you, I don't want no problems, but disrespect will not be tolerated. What? Fuck you, Crab. Crab is one of the worst things you can call Crip. On the streets, you could expect to catch a bullet for that slight. That word was all it took to goad Colton into action. He pulled a piece of metal from his sleeve and stabbed the man in the face. He struck him hard enough to knock him unconscious. Colton spun around and ran. He didn't get away with that. He was taken to ADSEG, or administrative segregation, similar to the SHU, for assaulting an inmate. He received an additional 180 days for that stunt. Things got worse for Colton. He and Gina grew apart. She met another man and initiated divorce proceedings. It got to the point where she wouldn't even write him letters anymore. She became disillusioned by him when he developed a richer vocabulary after becoming more widely read. She accused him of, quote, talking white. This was the last straw for her after everything else she had endured as the wife of an inmate. It wasn't just Gina who expressed disappointment in his new incarnation as a peacemaker and intellectual. His fellow Crips didn't enjoy this new Colton, the one that was so reluctant to engage in more violence. As he explained to a Crip known as Lil Man, "'Cause I'm still crazy Colton. I still love the set. But I can help you from outside the walls better than in here. I can look after our families and loved ones. We don't want our little brothers and our kids to follow in our footsteps and have lives of prison and destruction, do we?" Little Man wasn't sold. "You can't just quit being a Crip." Colton said, "There's lots of ways of representing the set. Look at Ice-T." Colton was transferred to a facility called Calipatria. There was just as much violence at this institution, much of it involving staff, who provoked some of the attacks. For instance, in May 1995, a white corrections officer noticed a Crip was wearing saggy pants. which was trendy at the time with the gang. He told him to put his pants up. Sagging had become a symbol of Cripism, along with the blue clothing. When the Crip refused, the officer took him to the hole. The next day, an alarm broke out, and 100 COs in riot gear stormed the facility. It was not a cakewalk. 20 of them retreated, covering other officers who were bleeding and crying out in pain. Because of this incident, every prison in the state was on lockdown status. State of emergency plans were initiated. The event even received extensive coverage in the media. 5 Crips stormed the prison's program office with shanks they fashioned out of pieces of metal they found by chance around the institution. They stabbed 8 corrections officers, including such high-ranking officials as sergeants and lieutenants. It was such a vicious attack, a female officer's breasts were slashed. Numerous officers resigned, recognizing that they didn't control the facility as effectively as they should have. The inmates were on lockdown for 6 months. Following the lockdown period, a female lieutenant pulled a Crip out of the chow line for sagging. She arranged for him to be cuffed and beaten. 2 of his homies attacked the guards, kicking the woman in her stomach. Once again, staff in riot gear stormed the building, complete with fatigues, helmets, tasers, billy clubs, handcuffs, loaded belts, and guns. 3 busloads of Crips were driven to Corcoran. When the Crips arrived, a white CO said, "Welcome to hell." The Crips were shackled as a chain gang. They were punched, kicked, and beaten with batons. The white CO grabbed the man's braid and severed it from his head with a box cutter. He said, "Fuck you, fuck this African bullshit." All braids were cut, or to be precise, yanked out. The Crips were roughed up once more, and then housed strategically among Mexicans, knowing full well that there was an ongoing war between the blacks and the Mexicans. Once the Crips were approved for the shoe yard, they were attacked before they could get properly situated, courtesy of the COs who wanted to avenge the incident at Calipatria. Before the Crips could get out of the cuffs, the Mexicans began stabbing them. They didn't act alone. The Nazi lowriders and Aryan Brotherhood were brandishing buck knives and hypodermic syringes filled with poison and bleach. The Crips didn't stand a chance. The COs mocked the blacks as this transpired. Eventually, the only guard at this facility with a conscience submitted some materials to the FBI that served as evidence that inmates were murdered by correction officers, either directly or through conspiracy. In 1993, Corcoran guards set up a black inmate by leaving him in a cell alone with a white sexual predator. The black man called for help, but they ignored his appeals. 4 of the guards were eventually charged. At the time, California's prisons were notorious for such incidents, occurring more often than in any other state. It's hard to avoid being violent in such an environment, especially when you're a member of the Crips. At that point, Colton only retaliated when challenged. It was about this time that a white inmate named Tim came into Colton's life through a work assignment. He encouraged Colton to write his autobiography. He said something to Colton that Colton had said to others. "You can do more for yourself on the street than behind bars." Colton realized Tim was right. Prison had only taught Colton to be more violent, and it hadn't paid off. There was no long-term reward other than being a ghetto celebrity. The conflicts and beefs were never-ending. For the most part, prison was just a cauldron of paranoia, hatred, and violence, and everybody went back for seconds. Tim said to him, "Besides, see, how old are you now?" 32. Party's over. June 10th, 1998. Colton Simpson was paroled after 12.5 years. He would turn 33 years old 6 days later. A friend helped him get a job providing services to the music industry. One day while he was working, his pager went off. He didn't recognize the number. The voice said, "You sound old as hell." Colton said, "Who is this?" "Oh, you don't know my voice no more, huh? See, this is Trey, your homie. Didn't know I had your number, huh?" Trey is Ice-T's gang moniker. Colton said, "Ah, what's up, Ice?" "You, sir, you the man." "Nah, you the man. I hear you're the rap star / actor, Ice." "You've been knowing me too long to be calling me Ice. Just call me Tracy or Trey. I ain't went Hollywood on you or nothing. I'm still your homeboy." "Okay, Trey. So you gonna come see me? You still know your way around L.A., don't you? I might just have a job for you. Come now." "But Trey, how'd you get my number?" "What do you mean how I get your number? I'm still Trey. I'm in traffic." Ice-T gave Colton a job with his label, Coroner Records. Colton realized he had to negotiate his way out of full-time Cripdom. One senior member of the gang agreed that he could serve the Crips just as well on the outside by writing his book. He was advised to warn children about the perils of gang life. Now in his 40s, Colton Simpson reflects on his time as an active member of the Crips. This is an excerpt from that statement. "Every Crip, including myself, started out as a child open to love. Most of us never found any love except what we gave each other. We used that as an excuse to do what we did. The Crips became my family, and I gave them my loyalty, my life. I thought it was the right thing to do. I did prison time for this family, honored them, and kept the code. But now I'm almost 40, and everywhere I look I see destroyed lives. I see kids in every state in this country looking up to the Crips, ready to join. I read the statistics. Blacks are 6 times more likely to be murdered. South Central LA, all by itself, accounted for 50% of all homicides in LA. In 2003, Alan Beck, chief prison demographer for the Bureau of Justice Statistics, an arm of the Justice Department, reported that while 1.6% of white men between 20 and 34 are in prison, 12% of black men 20 to 34 are in prison, and it's calculated that 28% of all black men will be sent to jail or prison in their lifetime. My people are still enslaved. I am still haunted by the things I did and saw. Every time I turn around, I see another person slaughtered. I see blood drenching the ground. I close my eyes and see blood. Even in my dreams. For most of my life, I pushed people violently away from me, my homies, and our space. It was not out of anger, but obligation. I sincerely thought I was a soldier in a legitimate, necessary war. But now, the thought of pushing someone's child to extinction has made me an insomniac. I don't think I'll even sleep till this stops. That's why I wrote this book. I'm crying for help, hoping you will listen and care, hoping all of us together will work to stop the sources of the gangs. And yet every day, another child joins the gang, and it starts all over again. Colton Simpson's life as a free man was short-lived. He was found guilty of robbery, burglary, and grand theft. He was sentenced under California's so-called 3 strikes law because of his previous offenses, which were nearly identical. He was sentenced to 126 years. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.
I used to listen to rappers flow, talking about the way they rock the mic at the disco. I like how that shit was going down. Dreamt about ripping the mic with my own sound, so I tried to write rhymes something like them. My boy said, that ain't you, Ike, that shit sounds like him. So I sat back, thought up a new track, didn't fantasize, kicked the pure facts. Motherfuckers got scared cause they was unprepared. Who would tell it how it really was, who dared? A motherfucker from the West Coast, L.A., South Central, fool, where the Crips and the Bloods play. When I wrote about parties, it didn't fit.
6 in the morning.
That was the real shit.
OG, original gangster. 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 OG, original gangster.
When I wrote about parties, someone always died. When I tried to ride happy, yo, I knew I lied. Cause I live a life of crime, why play you blind? A simple looking anyone with 2 cents would know I'm a hardcore player from the streets, rapping about hardcore topics over hardcore drum beats. A little different than the average though. Jet you through the fast lane, drop you on death row. Cause anybody who's been there knows that life ain't so lovely on the blood so fast track. That invincible shit don't work. Throw you in the joint, you'll be coming out feet first. So I blast the mic with my style. Sometimes I'm ill and other times buck wild, but the science is always there. I'd be a true sucker if I act like I didn't care. I rap for brothers just like myself, dazed by the game in a quest for extreme wealth. But I kick it to you hard and real. One wrong move and your cap's peeled. I ain't no superhero, I ain't no Marvel comic, but when it comes to game, I'm atomic and dropping it straight point blank and untwisted. No imagination needed, cause I lived it. This ain't no fucking joke, this shit is real to me. I'm Ice-T, O.G.
OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster.
2 weeks ago, I was out at the disco. 2 brothers stepped up to me and said, hey yo, Ice, we don't think you're down. What set you claiming? E drew the Glock. Yo, my set saying, dumb motherfucker, try to roll on me. Please, I'm protected by 1,000 MCs and hoodlums and hustlers and bangers with Jerry curls. We won't even count the girls, cause they got my back and I got theirs too. Fight for the streets when I'm an Oprah Donahue. They try to sweat a nigga, but they just didn't figure that my wit's as quick as a hair trigger. He's not your everyday type prankster. I'm Ice-T, the original gangster.
OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster.
So step to me if you think that you're ready to. Got on your bulletproof, well mine's going right through. This ain't no game to me, it's hollow fame to me. Without respect from the streets, so I don't claim to be the hardest motherfucker on earth. Catch me slipping, I can even get work, but I don't slip that often. There's a coffin waiting for the brother who comes up soft when the real fucking shit goes down. Take a look around, all the pussies can't be found. They talk a mean fight but fight like hoes. I'm from South Central, fool, where everything goes. Snatch you out your car so fast you'll get whiplash. Numbers on your rooftop, but when the copters pass, gangbangers don't carry no switchblades. Every kid's got a Tech 9 or a hand grenade. 37 killed last week in a crack war. Hostages tied up and shot in a liquor store. Nobody gives a fuck.
The children have to go to school.
Well, mom's good luck, cause the shit's fucked up bad. I use my pad and pen, and my lyrics break out mad. I try to write about fun in the good times, but the pen yanks away and explodes and destroys the rhyme. Maybe it's just cause of where I'm from, L.A. That was a shotgun.
OG, original gangster. OG, original